Welcome into episode 188 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Tonight at the TD Garden, the Bruins fell to the Florida Panthers 6-3. The best of seven series is now tied at one apiece, heading down to Sunrise, Florida for Friday night. And I mean, that was just a brutal game by the Bruins all the way around. You can sit there and say that the effort was there at times, but the carelessness with the puck, the lackadaisical play was quite frankly inexcusable. And if they feel like they can rest on their laurels of a 65-win season, not that they think that, but their play certainly kind of showed that tonight. And they weren't great in game one either. So they better figure out what's going on here, because if they don't pick it up, their season could be for naught.
Yeah, I mean, what a time to have one of your absolute worst games of the season. Like, put Wednesday night's game 2 up there with, I don't know, the Chicago loss. Like, there's been so few of these games, and to have one in game 2 of the playoffs is, it's brutal. I think Panthers have been the better 5-on-5 team this series, but I don't think the Panthers have done anything that's like totally overwhelming. I think for the most part in game 2, the Bruins beat themselves. Eventually it got out of hand in the third, and they didn't have it. They, couldn't dig deep and come back. But the way that they got behind is because they made some just absolutely inexcusable turnovers. Brandon Carlo came out of the zone I don't know what he was trying to like. I don't know if he just enough in his pass or where he was going with that. Charlie McAvoy, and instead of making an easy play behind the net to his D partner, tries turning up ice and runs into traffic, and next thing you know, that's in the back of the net. Game one, like we talked about how the Panthers will blast away from the point. Game 1, Bruins did a good job of getting in shooting lanes, tying up sticks, letting Allmark see shots. Game 2, you see Brendan Montour scored twice on shots from the point, where the Bruins aren't tying guys up, aren't getting in shooting lanes, and are instead just screening Linus Allmark. So, a lot of things went wrong, especially in their own zone. Like, that needs to be cleaned up offensively. We'll get to that. I didn't think they worked hard enough to get really quality scoring chances. But certainly the D zone play and the turnovers really stood out.
Yeah, no, the turnovers were just killer. And the weird thing about the way that they played was that I don't think I've seen them play like that at all once this year. So then when you're actually seeing it in front of you, you're just kind of shocked, because I mean, they've had some real stinkers of periods in, maybe one here or there, like the Chicago one. I had looked up the 4-goal period. They had 4 goals against them in the third against Chicago, and they had one really bad period against Pittsburgh, which they ended up coming back and winning that game. But this was just not what we've seen on Garden ice. Like, it was only their 5th loss all year at the Garden. And so for fans and for us reporters, this was not something we had seen one time this year at the Garden. Scott, I don't know if you can remember a period that went as poorly as the third, the outcome as poorly as that. And this obviously is worse than any regular season game, because those, for a long time, the Bruins had knotted up a playoff position. And so towards the end of the year, some of those losses were meaningless anyway. And then in a game you see that's so important, it was kind of shocking to see them fall apart the way they did. Once Florida got that 2-goal lead, it just kind of felt like everything was deflated, and that people it almost felt like they knew that it could go, we could get back into it, but they never were able to pull it together. And it was so uncharacteristic of them that even though I didn't predict a sweep like Scott did, I didn't see a loss like this being part of the series.
I certainly saw the potential for it. I mean, I never thought that this was going to be. I think I have Bruins in 6 before the series. I just don't. I think I was saying before. I feel like Florida they have too much talent and too much sandpaper to be a like they're a tough opponent. And this is why I didn't want to play them, because you watch the Islanders and the Hurricanes, and that series is just kind of it can. Tonight was a good game, but in general, their style of play can kind of put you to sleep. Like this Florida team, any team that has Matthew Tkachuk as your emotional leader, they're gonna be physically engaged. They're gonna be emotionally invested, and you add to that the addition of Sam Bennett to the Panthers lineup tonight. He and Matthew Tkachuk they were buddies in Calgary, and they ran around for years against Edmonton, and they were a big part of that rivalry, and they play with their hearts in their sleeves. So for this is why it's like you talk before the series about how the Bruins have the edge in every category, and on paper they should win. The problem is games aren't played on paper, and in my opinion, the Panthers is there a train behind me or you, Scott?
That's me. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Thought it was on the Polar Express for a second. I just feel like the Bruins, you have to come ready to play, and quite frankly, I think Florida's been the better team for the majority of the 6 periods in the series so far, and they earned the victory tonight. I thought it's one of those games where it's tough to look at one Bruin in particular and call him out for playing poor, because I thought most players on the Bruins tonight played poorly. But what I can tell you is that I am not a fan of the Krejci, Pasternak, Bertuzzi line combination. I think that Montgomery should go back to Zacha between those two wingers and stick Krejci with Marchand and DeBrusk if Bergeron's still out. If Bergeron comes back, then I don't know. Figure something out. We talked about it in past episodes. Montgomery just didn't really, as great as he's done all year, he never really had a chance to see what a full lineup would look like, because there's always been somebody hurt post deadline. And so if Bergeron is healthy enough to play in game 3, which we don't know if that's true, I don't know where you're going to put Krejci, but I'll tell you, I don't like him with Bertuzzi and Pasternak. So maybe you try the check line again and then slide Bertuzzi down. I don't know. The forward lines are not clicking right now. And it's not just because Bergeron's out. I don't think the line combinations with Bergeron out were optimized, in my opinion. And the forward grouping looks slow. Hampus Lindholm looks slow, but we'll keep it to the forwards for now.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think 3 of the 4 lines have, for the most part, been pretty solid this series. Marchand, Zacha, DeBrusk, I think, has actually been really good. But you nailed it. The Bertuzzi, Krejci, Pasternak line has been poor. Like, they've just been spending way too much time in their own zone. They cannot sustain anything offensively. Obviously they've made an impact on the power play with Bertuzzi setting up Pasternak in game 1, Bertuzzi scoring in game 2, but 5-on-5, they have been caved in. The Bruins have been outshot 21-6 with that line on the ice in this series. Like, that's awful. And it's like it's a waste of Pasternak, honestly. Like, you don't want him spending 70% of his shifts in the D zone, and if that's how that line is going to be playing, like, you have to try something else. It has to be, whether it's someone who's going to bring more defensive edge to it, who will be better breaking out. I mean, at times that line, when they were on the ice, they were just resorting to like Pasternak cherry picking and flipping it out to the neutral zone and hoping something happened. It's like, that's not how the Bruins transition. Like, that's just desperation. So yeah, they got to do something else there. David Pasternak had 1 5-on-5 shot attempt in game 2. Like, and that's because he was spending so much time in their own zone, and the 3 of them together there's not enough there defensively to win pucks back and get going the other way and sustain offensive pressure. So yeah, whether it is, Zacha joins that line in some capacity, or, I was thinking, like, could you do like Marchand, Krejci, Pasternak, and then then you would have a line of Bertuzzi, Zacha, DeBrusque. Like, there's a few different ways you could go, but you got to do something else because that line's not working. And by the way, now you're going on the road where the Paul Maurice can get whatever matchup he wants out against that line. So they, at least at home, they were seeing a little bit of the third and fourth line. You better believe it. If they keep that together on the road, they are going to see either the Barkov line or the Bennett Tkachuk line the entire game.
Yeah, they're not a good defensive line. Like, okay, there were times and on the stall goal, it was very noticeable where they lose a puck in the neutral zone and they don't get back. Pastrnak and Bertuzzi were both chasing that play. It was Bertuzzi's guy, I believe, that scored, and they just kind of hung everybody out to dry. There was 3 Bruins defending instead of 5 because Bertuzzi and Pastrnak hadn't gotten back, and it was them I believe it was Bertuzzi that turned it over in the neutral zone before that. So they haven't been clicking at least in game 2, they were not clicking offensively, and their mistakes, they weren't willing to go get the puck back. They kind of just let their defensemen handle it after the turnovers. And I don't know, I did not like, I would say just like even the general attitude of that line was a little bit like lax. And Bertuzzi made some really dumb passes today. Like that, there were some things that I was just shocked by. He loves this no look backwards pass to no one sometimes, or to Tkachuk today at one point. But he had some of the worst turnovers in the game. Obviously, there was some pretty bad failed clears, like Scott already mentioned. But sometimes you do that backhand pass over to Pastrnak and he scores and it looks great, but it's not going to look like that every time, and that needs to stop. So I thought it was very careless. I think careless is probably a word you could use for a lot of the mistakes they made in a lot of, big portions of the game. It was just kind of choppy, careless play.
I would agree. I also feel like, at least with Bertuzzi, though, yes, he made a couple of ill-advised passes that could have led to a goal, but he also, at least he's making his presence felt in other ways out there, and obviously he scored, right? But I feel like
I really like that goal. He was just standing in the right spot, and Zoc shot it off.
But that's something that a lot of players don't do. So you got to give him credit for that. He's going to the right area of the ice and willing to take. He's willing to go there.
I would say maybe he's just had a frustrating night. I mean, he was frustrated. We were frustrated watching, what was going on. But I didn't think he had a good night. I don't know if you guys disagree, but I thought that, he's gonna be like that. He's gonna be aggressive. He's gonna be an agitator. That's how he plays. But it's different when you're also, backing it up with your play and not, part of the problem.
I guess, yeah, I don't disagree. I don't think he had a great night in particular, but I think other players were just as bad, if not worse. And on that line, I look at David Krejci, right? You're a 15-year guy, 16-year guy in the NHL. You've been around the block and then some. And it just seems like, to me, what do people call him, right? They call him playoff Kretsch because he twice led the postseason in scoring. Well, a massive part of playoff hockey is being willing to go above and beyond in 50-50 battles and really get your nose in there. And I think that Krejci just, when he's not feeling it, he just isn't there. He's not there. He's just a guy out there, and he doesn't look like he's just taking up space, and he's soft. And I'm a huge David Krejci fan, but if you were to tell me or ask me, Brian, what's the biggest difference between watching Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci over their careers? Because both are great at both sides of the puck, but Bergeron's always been a better competitor. Just like as far as shift in, shift out, doing what needs to be done. And Krejci, when you have a brand new line like he is on with Bertuzzi and Pastrnak, you need to rely on that centerman to have that experience to kind of be the backbone of that line. I know there's a 60-goal scorer on the right wing, but if I'm casting blame, with all due respect to the Bertuzzi argument, I'm gonna hold him accountable, but I'm gonna hold other players accountable before him, because at least he was out there and being physical and outside of the turnovers was trying to be engaged. I saw a lot of players just kind of going through the motions out there up front,
which is kind of the scary part, because at no point in the season, like there are very few points in the regular season that they look like they were just going through the motions. How could that be, what you were doing in a playoff game and not finding a new gear? I mean, Marchand did. Marchand was running around. I thought Taylor Hall had a decent game, but that's two people. And
Taylor Hall had a couple brutal turnovers too, though.
he did.
Even the one that ends with, Carlo on the field breakout, Hall had 2 turnovers that shift that led to the extended possession in the first place. Like one in the neutral zone and then a drop pass to no one that led to the Florida rush the other way. So, he ends up getting a garbage time goal late, but I thought he really dropped off. Jim Montgomery called him their best 5-on-5 forward in game 1, and I think that might have been accurate. I thought Taylor Hall was really good in game 1. I thought he was not good in game 2. I thought Coyle brought it. I thought Marchand brought it. Fourth line was, decent enough, I guess. They at least brought some energy at times, but other than that, a lot of no-shows. Brian, I agree that Bertuzzi was trying and seemed to bring some energy, some effort at times, but overall, I thought it was still a pretty poor game from him. Just that whole line. I think I'm with Brian in that, if I'm gonna, I guess do the blame pie for that second line, then Krejci probably deserves the most. Generally, a line's going to go as the center goes, and I think Krejci has struggled so far this series, and I don't know if that's, is he still dealing with whatever was lingering late in the season that caused him to miss the last 4 games, possibly, but he led all forwards in ice time in game 1, so I don't know if he would be doing that if he was 75%. So, but yeah, I mean, he's I keep going back to just when Florida's had possession and that line's been on the ice, it's like everyone's just playing really soft defense and almost prevent defense, where it's they're just okay, just try to keep my guy in front of me, but they're not attacking the puck, they're not winning it back. So it's it's almost just going through the motions and trying not to, I don't know, not to give up a grade A chance, but it's if you spend enough time in your zone, then eventually you're gonna crack. The Bruins are at their best when they are attacking and defending aggressively and working to win pucks back, and that line especially, I just thought was very passive defensively. And on that goal, as Bridget highlighted, Pasternak and Bertuzzi are both caught, above the puck, and it was they both expected the other one to be covering Eric Stahl, who, by the way, Eric Stahl is 49 years old and slow, and you're telling me Pasternak and Bertuzzi can't keep up with him? What are we doing, guys? That's just pure effort or communication, or there's no reason Eric Stahl should be getting separation from Pasternak and or Bertuzzi.
I also felt like that line was oftentimes matched up against Tkachuk, Bennett, and was it Verhaeghe? Was that the third guy on that line?
Yeah, they do a little switching, but yeah, he was with them at times, and Luostarinen was with them at times.
So, but at least the combination of Bennett and Tkachuk up against Krejci and Pasternak, their physicality, that's what happens. We talk about before the playoffs started, it's there is such a difference, and we all know this, but such a difference between the regular season when you're playing different teams on different schedules and everybody's just trying to, go through the grind of a regular season and nobody's really matched, it's regular season hockey. It's glorified pond hockey relative for these NHL players. The playoffs, it's watch this game. It's when Brad Marchand's on the ice, Radko Gudas is wearing a Halloween costume. And then when that's not a matchup, you have Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett checking Krejci hard, checking Pasternak hard. The effort that it entails for the Bruins to be as successful as they were in the regular season, in the postseason, the effort has to be just so much better. The execution, decision making has to be so much crisper. They need a lot more vindication in their game, and like they just seem they're way too cute. They're not keeping it simple. Just like again, it's like how do you have a season with 65 wins, then get to the postseason and just neglect all the basics that got you there? Like it's a new season. Like they are capable of losing 4 games just like everybody else. And so like I think that Florida has absolutely outworked Boston for the I would say majority of the 2 games so far, at least 5-on-5. I think Florida they certainly earned a winning game 2. You can make the argument that Florida could have won game 1 too based off of effort alone. So now they're going down to Florida, and it's going to be a tall task. And we don't know if Bergeron's going to be in. So I don't know if you guys wanted to touch on the forwards a little bit further. We could touch on Bergeron potentially too. But if we're keeping it to game 2, there's certainly a lot to talk about on the blue line as well, and certain performances back there.
Yeah, I'm good with switching to defense. We can get to Bergeron towards the end, but yeah, like obviously his return would be enormous. We were talking about how, or not really us, but you heard people talking about like, oh, do you just, let Bergeron rest up because you can handle the Panthers? And it's like, no, like you don't assume anything in the playoffs. If Bergeron could play, he would be playing it. And we did find out today, finally, that it was injury, not illness, that's keeping him out. So, yeah, like that's obviously concerning. He has an injury that has kept him out of 2 playoff games, and we know what Bergeron will play through. So you can imagine that it's something, fairly serious. Montgomery still called him, day to day, so they're not ruling him out for any prolonged period of time. But yeah, like clearly they did miss him. They definitely missed him in game 2. So, for anyone who thought like they're just going to be fine and they'll roll past the Panthers, like I know I picked a sweep. I obviously acknowledged before, game 1 that like if Bergeron was going to miss time, that changes it. But
oh, I didn't know there was an asterisk in there, Scott. Do we get to play that game?
Well, this is my point, is like I'm not one of those people who looked at it and said like, oh, whatever, they'll be fine without Bergeron. Like, no, Patrice Bergeron is still a really damn good hockey player, and you're going to miss him. And like anyone who didn't think they were was an idiot. So, yeah, like shocking. They miss a player who is still one of the 10 best centers in the NHL. Like, oh,
did you hear people saying that though? Because I try to think, like, I don't think I remember having a conversation where they're hearing anyone say they thought that they would be fine without Bergeron. I like a lot of the conversation, and it's going to get worse now, was that, Bergeron's too big of a piece to miss time in the playoffs. So rest him. And then we have the situation where he gets hurt in game 82 in Montreal and hasn't been back since. So that's more what I heard.
I listened to too much sports radio. So
we literally work for sports radio, and yes. I try not to listen.
I've heard people saying that the Bruins could get by the first round without him. Not necessarily the succeeding rounds, but for round 1, people have been saying, Boston had 135 points. They should get by Florida in the first round, because people look at it very matter of factly. They look at it like President's Trophy winners, greatest regular season of all time. You're playing an 8 seed. You don't need your captain. You shouldn't need your captain. The problem is, I don't like when people look at things like that, because if you watch the team, you understand, like, yes, the Bruins did accomplish those things, but we all know that if you have a couple of off games in the playoffs, that's all it takes. You go down 2 games in a series, like, the whole world looks different. So I have heard people say that, but to Scott's point, I think it's idiotic. I think to take any team in the NHL for granted is so stupid, because the parity is so similar, regardless if you have the best winning record of all time in the regular season, or if you just got into the playoffs because the parity, because of the salary cap era, which, by the way, the Bruins have kind of worked around this year. But like the Florida Panthers, okay, they won a President's Trophy last year. They switched out Huberdeau for Tkachuk. That's a win. And yes, they lost Mackenzie Weegar. But like, it's not like they had a massive, and they lost Mason Marchment to Dallas, but it's not like they had a massive personnel turnover from the President's Trophy roster that they were last year. So to look at them like a traditional 8 seed, I feel like is irresponsible for fans. And like they had a really bad first half of the season. Florida did, but they are on paper, they are not an 8 seed. So to look at it any other way would be silly. But yeah, I kind of forget what we were even talking about, but yeah.
Well, I do want to ask, just because we're kind of walking down this road, Scott, after seeing, the way that the Bruins have matched up against Florida in the first 2 games, do you feel like maybe you would have changed your mind a little bit about the Islanders versus the Panthers, who the Bruins would match up better against? Because even the goaltending has been okay. Like, it hasn't been terrible. Lyon has made some, he's let in some soft ones, but he's also not played bad enough to get pulled out. They had a chance to take him out for game 2. They keep him in there. And I don't know how you feel about the matchup now and what it looks like when you actually see it as probably what would have been the Bruins' toughest, and is the Bruins' toughest outcome for how they could have drawn an opponent.
No, I don't know. I mean, I still
so I'm
think
not going to change your mind now.
I don't really think there's any point to even like doing this exercise, honestly, because like my reasoning was I was worried more about Sorokin than anything that the Panthers had. So like I'll stick by that, I guess. But I never thought like the Panthers were a bad team. I thought the Bruins, if Bergeron was going to be in, could sweep them because they're much better defensively and have a much better goalie. In game 2, neither of those things were true. Their defense let them down. And Ullmark, I guess we might as well get to this. Like, I didn't think Ullmark played very well in game 2. Like, yeah, the defense in front of him let him down, hung him out to dry, whatever you want to call it. But I thought there were a few savable shots in there that got past him. The first one, Sam Bennett, like, yes, he's coming in alone, but he gets beat on a kind of weak shot 5-hole. Like, it was just seemed like a little out of position and had his legs too open. The shots through screens in game 1, I thought he did a great job of fighting to make sure he saw everything and gobbled them up. And game 2, he didn't really, those 2 Montour shots, like, he wasn't able to track them. He didn't fight hard enough to see around the screen. So, yeah, I mean, Alex Lyon, I thought was pretty bad in game 1. That, like, I heard some people saying, like, oh, he was really good because he stopped those couple 2-on-1s. But to me, if you give up like a couple soft goals, which I thought he did, then that kind of qualifies as a bad game in the playoffs. But he bounced back. I thought he was good in game 2. So, yeah, I mean, things haven't gone the way that I expected, mostly because Bergeron isn't in. And secondly, because I didn't think there was going to be a game like this from the Bruins defense and goaltending. I just thought, that they're so much better than this. They should be so much better than this. And they still can be. Like, if the Bruins play up to their potential, they could win the next 3 and gentlemen sweep them. Like, that's still on the table, but part of losing game 2, I thought, was them beating themselves. And that's always going to be a recipe for disaster in the playoffs, no matter who the opponent is. So
here's another question then, because when Coach was asked after the game, would he make a defensive change? Like, would the outcome and what he saw in game 2 prompt a change in defensive personnel? And he said he's going to consider changing everything in all positions. And I don't know why the first thing that popped into my head was goaltending. I know the question was about moving Grzelcyk back in. But do you think there's changes that need to be made defensively? Like, are you switching someone else into the lineup on defense, offense, and you know, even in that?
Yeah, I think I would make changes at all three levels. We already touched on forward. I would absolutely, at the very least, you have to change Bertuzzi, Krejci, Pasternak. I don't think you can run that line back. On defense, I do think Grzelcyk could help. I think now would be a good time to get him in, especially when you're looking at breakouts and transitions that have been pretty poor. Not that Grzelcyk's immune to turnovers. Anyone is capable of them, and Grzelcyk's made them in the past. But especially a game like tonight, you see like forward ice time way down, especially 5-on-5, especially when they're trailing. Like he's, you know, you can't really use him in that situation. He doesn't bring enough to the table. You know, when they fell down this game, it's like those are situations where you're used to seeing that Grzelcyk McAvoy pairing because they can be so good in the offensive zone and help create stuff. And I know you don't ever plan on being behind and you want to think positively and you know, hope that you're protecting leads, but the reality of the playoffs is like there's going to be times that you're down a goal or two and you have to come back. And you know, I just think Grizzly could help their 5-on-5 game because that's, you know, I think they've struggled. I think Florida's been the better 5-on-5 team. And in goal, it's closer for me, but I would think I would probably make the switch to Swayman for game 3. Just because, like I said, I thought Allmark was a little off, and I think they've been so close all season. You guys know I've been open to carrying a rotation into the playoffs. So for me, like I would have already been planning to play both. If Allmark was great in both games and they lost tonight 2-1 instead of 6-3, then I'd be like, okay, well, Allmark's been great. I understand if you just want to keep riding him, that's fine. But I think since he had an off game, you know, look, if he's your like true number one, and this is like the classic approach that you take, you know, with that you would have taken with Tim Thomas or Tuukka Rask, then I guess you keep riding him. And I kind of feel like that's probably what they're going to do, honestly, is I think they're going to just keep riding Allmark because they've decided he's their number one, and it's going to have to get, you know, bad multiple games in a row to move to take him out. But personally, I would go to Swayman because I think they've been so close. Swayman has argued, and you know, he fresh. I think this is
Bridget, did you have something to say?
Yes, because I didn't hear the end
Guessing
of
I
what
just broke
Scott was
up.
saying. But I will say that in a conversation that I had, the only reason not the only reason, but I think they stick with Allmark, and this is my main reason why, is because I was in a conversation earlier today with some of the other reporters, and they said that this morning Swayman was maybe not seeming fully healthy, and was asking for calcium and was just not 100%. So, you know, there's a chance that his health factors into whether or not he'll play game 3 as well.
Well, ironically enough, I also feel like that goes for Allmark too, because before I want to say it was the 4th Panthers goal, there was like a shift or two before Montour scored, or maybe it was I forget who it was who scored their 4th goal. But about a shift or two before that goal, there was a play where Allmark kind of stretched out to make a save again on like a Boston giveaway, and he covered the puck up, and during the whistle, you could just kind of see him like wincing. So I don't know if Allmark is battling through something as well. So I mean, but if they're both healthy or ready to play, I would probably give Allmark game 3 just because I just feel like if you go to Swayman after one loss, it just creates opportunity for getting in your own head about who's the right guy to go with now, game in and game out. But if Allmark loses game 3, I'm good to ride Swayman until he gives you a reason to put Allmark back in. Also, I would play Swayman in game 3 if Allmark is laboring and Swayman's not. I don't want Allmark in there if he's not 100%. So if he is battling through something, I'd rather Swayman in. But if he's healthy, I'd like to see Allmark get a chance at it again. But that's the goaltending situation. That's one conversation. But Bridget, to your other questions on the back end, I'm all for Grzelcyk going in for Forbert. I think, look, if I'm going to be consistent, like I felt like he was a good addition to the lineup for game 1, and they won game 1. So I would stick with it for game 2 with Forbert in the lineup, because I just think that Florida was a heavier team, and they have been a heavier team. But then you have a game like tonight where the Bruins couldn't get out of their own way, and Forbert's a part of that, and they were careless with the puck. I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, but I still want size. No, he had his chance. He wasn't great in game 2. Neither were a lot of the Bruins players, but him included. So I'm all for putting Grzelcyk back in the lineup and adding some more mobility and transition to their game, because I know Montgomery said he liked their breakouts for most of the game tonight. I didn't really see much going on there. I thought they were pretty kind of stuck in the mud because they couldn't get out of their own way. And by the way, to start the game, I know we talked about it online. It was there were 9 whistles in the first 2 minutes of the game. There wasn't a lot of fluidity to the game in the first period, and the Bruins play was also not very fluid. And then the last thing I'll say, so the goaltending situation, I'm kind of indifferent. It kind of depends on each goalie's health. But if they're both healthy, I'd say Allmark. I would sub in Grzelcyk for Forbert. Up front, definitely want to change up the lines that were tonight. And I also wouldn't mind subbing in AJ Greer or Jacob Lauko on that 4th line, maybe for Nick Foligno, or just because he hasn't really done much, and he's still coming back from injury. And I thought that 4th line was playing great before Foligno came back. So I think Lauko would be an absolute energizer bunny for the Bruins in game 3. He'd run around. Same with AJ Greer. So I wouldn't mind something like that. And then I don't know if Thomas Nosek will potentially have a call for that higher hit to was it Eric Stahl? Didn't seem too vicious, but if the elbow did graze the head, I wouldn't be surprised if the league took a look. And who knows? I mean, he could get a game for that. He might get nothing. I really don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if they're going to look at that, then they also look at Aaron Ekblad's hit on Dmitry Orlov. And honestly, like, I don't think they're going to look at either one, but or at least won't have a call for either one, but I guess we'll see. Just on injury and illness with Ullmark and Swayman, since, we kind of touched on it. Let's remember, Swayman missed practice on Sunday with an illness. So we know he was dealing with something. My assumption is that because he's been practicing in full and has been the backup for games, I'm assuming he's healthy enough to play. Like, if Ullmark got injured on the first shot of the game, Swayman would be playing. So there's that. And then on Ullmark, it's like, yeah, let's remember his last regular season game, he left injured. And as much as they say it's precautionary and, not a big deal, and Ullmark says he's feeling fine, I mean, something started. He was laboring. He, was clearly slow to get up after stretching side to side, and then played a couple more minutes and then left the game, didn't return. So Ullmark looked really, really good in game 1. He said, didn't look like there were any lingering effects. Brian, you highlighted, that play where there's a little bit of laboring again, and it's like, okay, is that the same thing? Is it related? Is it something different? Like, we don't know, but yeah, certainly if there's something injury-wise going on, then even more reason to go with Swayman if he's healthy. Like Bridget said, maybe he is still sick too. I find it a little bit hard to believe that, if he's too sick to be starting games, then to me he's too sick to be backing up in the playoffs, because what if something happened to Ullmark, you're going to go to a sick Jeremy Swayman who shouldn't be playing? That doesn't seem like something that would be happening.
I just really wish I knew what the bug was that was going through and like what the actual symptoms were and like the recovery and why it's just been so devastating so far, seemingly affected, everyone from Pasternak to Swayman to Bergeron apparently at one point. Nosek didn't go to Montreal, Lauco. So this is first of all, the worst possible timing for something like this to go through the team. And it seems to be pretty severe in that it's taken guys longer to recover from, and it's not been as easy to play through as just your normal everyday cold or flu or whatever. So that's what makes this difficult, and it's a bit of bad luck, you could say, for sure, because timing wise couldn't have happened at a worse time. And then for Ullmark and Bergeron to be dealing with these injuries at the same time this is going on with the illness, things are starting to pile up. And we knew some of that could happen. I don't think I would have guessed like illness like this. But if your two goalies are both 80%, and they've been, for the most part, both able to go at 100%, and two of the best goalies in the league for most of the season, now you are dealing with something that you didn't deal with in the regular season. So they're dealing with a few things that these are new challenges that they're going to have to get through. I want to talk, just because I posed the question but didn't get to answer it, about Grzelcyk and coming back in for forward. I agree. I want to see him out there. I liked before Forbert was in there, and we had this conversation as well. You get to split up Orlov and McAvoy, and then you also have one of your, a really solid defenseman on each of your three pairs. And if you put Grzelcyk back in there with McAvoy, you move Orlov down to the third pair, and you keep Lindholm Carlo together. It's a different look on the breakout. Like you mentioned, him and McAvoy have been a good pair the whole year. I don't see any reason why not to go for that for the 5-on-5 benefit that it would have. At the very end of the game when things were getting out of hand, Forbert did try to fight someone and, tried to add a little bit of energy, or maybe was just purely frustrated. That's the one thing he brings that Grzelcyk really does not. But I think it's time to try it for a game. I don't think anybody should be offended that something dictate, like matchups and situations dictate Grzelcyk to be in over Forbert or Forbert over Grzelcyk. So I'm ready to see Grzelcyk go in there. I really don't know what to expect for this game in Florida, though, in terms of like their response. They've had good responses after losses. They don't tend to have losing streaks, really. So it'll be interesting to see just the kind of energy that they bring when they get to Florida.
No, I think the game 2 heated up. So I'm sure you'll see both teams bringing the energy, and I think you'll start to see a little bit of that piss and vinegar from both sides. I think Florida's an emotional team. They don't get the credit they deserve because they're down in Florida, but they've had some pretty good run-ins with Tampa the last couple of years, regular season, postseason, where things have gotten pretty heated with them. So Florida's not going to back down from the Bruins. They have the guys that'll stand up for themselves and their teammates. You've seen it already in the series. But just one player I wanted to bring up is Hampus Lindholm. I don't know how he seems in person, but for me, he is a very, very, very intelligent hockey player, and he has some of the best instincts on the ice. And when he trusts his instincts and just plays the game that as he sees it in front of him, he is an elite defenseman in this league. But I feel that he has been playing way too methodical so far in this series, and he's been trying to play too perfect and make the perfect play and the perfect read. And it's slowing down his decision-making because he's overthinking a little bit. And when he's at his best, he's just going. He's just dictating play and taking the ice in front of him. And he just seems to be – he's pulling up on regroups. He's not being very decisive when when the Panthers dump the puck in, he's like just taking a little bit, an extra second or two to make that decision if he wants to go to his partner or go up the boards. He's just not himself. And Hampus Lindholm is not the most physical guy at all. And I'm wondering if the intensity of playoff hockey, considering the fact that while he does have experience in Anaheim going on some deep runs, you're talking 6-7 years ago now at this point. And last year, it was a quick stint for Boston. He missed a couple of games from injury after the Andrei Svechnikov hit that knocked him out. So I'm just wondering, do you feel like Lindholm's game is taking a little bit of time to acclimate to the playoff caliber of or style of play right now that's being asked of him?
I mean, I just kind of thinking about it, honestly, like I feel like he might be the defenseman I've been least worried about so far this series. Like, I do think he could probably take more chances and activate more, be a little bit more involved offensively. But, so maybe methodical or like safe was the word that came to mind. But defensively, like he's not one who's been like sticking out in terms of making mistakes or anything like that. He's on the ice for the goal against tonight, but that comes after a Carlo turnover. Like I think for the most part he's still been pretty solid. I think that pairing hasn't given up a ton other than that Carlo turnover. So yeah, Lindholm hadn't really crossed my mind as like a huge negative. Certainly not more than other guys. There's plenty I would put in that list ahead of him, but yeah, he, I mentioned like we would touch on them, not the Bruins offensively not creating enough high danger chances, which was definitely a problem in game 2. And I think part of that is I do feel like defensemen in general haven't been as involved as we've seen. Orlov was in game 1, but Lindholm we haven't seen as much, getting deep in the offensive zone, moving around, being involved. And I would say the same thing about McAvoy, I think has not had a great series. Or game 1, I thought McAvoy was really solid. Game 2 was a tough game for him. He had the one bad turnover. He's tied up with Barkov in front, screening Lindholm on another goal. And I didn't think he was nearly as active in game 2. So that's part of it. Like, obviously, forwards need to be doing more work. But I do think the big defensemen, your McAvoy, Lindholm, even Orlov, like, you do want to see them involved offensively more in helping to create some of those chances. And that's another area where Grzelcyk could help. Like, we know Grzelcyk doesn't put up a lot of points, but he can be active and help create offensively. So yeah, that's I guess long-winded take on Lindholm, which is like, I'm not sorry, but I do think he can probably be doing more.
Yeah, I just kind of meant like, and yeah, you answered it perfect, Scott. Like I don't know if I came across like I thought he was playing poorly. I guess what I was more so saying was I just feel like he's come to Boston and he's been such a horse and such a driver of offense and such a fantastic player that good, simply good or steady isn't good enough for him because he has more potential and more capabilities than the next guy. So I like when they brought him in and then when they got Orlov this year, it was just, the conversation was like, man, look at Boston. They boast 2.5 number 1 defensemen with Charlie McAvoy and then Hampus Lindholm and then Dmitry Orlov. So I guess what I'm saying is like at some point here in the playoffs, they're gonna have to be those guys on the score sheet as well, not just the good stick play here, and that's all great. You need to do that. I'm just saying more is expected of him, and you're right. Like McAvoy, if we're talking apples to apples, maybe I should have posed a question about McAvoy instead of Lindholm because maybe that wasn't fair. But maybe I just picked on Lindholm because I noticed a few plays tonight where he just seemed like not himself and he got caved in a few times on a forecheck. But certainly a lot is expected of him and McAvoy and even Orlov. And if they want this team to put them over the top, they're going to have to be what they are in the regular season in the postseason. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on Lindholm, Bridget, or anything else from the game.
No, I'm just like, as you guys were talking about that, trying to think of anything else, like just maybe that's not just speculation, because I feel like, if you guys were to guess would they have another game like that in them, I just don't see it happening a second time as bad as it was. Hopefully, game 2 was bad enough that it was a wake up call, and that they come out and respond very well in Friday's game in Florida. Because there's still the question marks about Bergeron, it makes it hard to say exactly what game 3 is going to look like. Same as the first 2 games. And we find out that it was not the illness and that it was injury. And it's just, it was gamesmanship a little bit, I assume, for game 1, but we still don't really know where he is. And reading between the lines a little bit from Montgomery's press conference this morning was, he said, somebody asked him, who makes the decision? Is it you? Is it the trainer? Is like Bergeron? And he said, it's everybody, but nobody thought he was ready to play today. So that makes me think he wasn't just like a game time decision like they said he was for game 1. If he wasn't a game time decision for game 2, there's no way he really was truly for game 1. And if no one agrees that he's ready to go back out there, then it's not like, I don't know how close he is necessarily. So that'd be a big blow. I mean, it'd be a big boost to get him back for sure, especially in a game especially after a game that you lose the way you lost, when you're kind of out of form and out of character. You get your best character guy back on the ice with you. That could be pretty big, but just, that could be a key factor in them getting back on track.
Certainly. So yeah, I mean, having him back would be massive. I mean, for me, it's like this game tonight was a massive missed opportunity. You win this game. Let's be honest. Florida's not winning 4 out of the next 5 to beat this Boston Bruins team. Instead, it's a 1-1 series going back to Florida. And the sad reality is the Bruins could play phenomenal in game 3. They could play a full 60 minutes of hockey. They could play a full 80 if it takes overtime. And it could take a bad bounce or a goalie standing on their head or a bad call, and they can end up losing the game. So it's just, you have to. You're not gonna. God bless you, Scott. You're not gonna.
I actually
unmutes his mic to sneeze.
I know. Well, yeah. Well, I was starting to talk, and then the sneeze came. But so but I actually disagree with that. It's like, that's where I still think if the Bruins play their best or close to it, I still think they win. Like, I don't see the Panthers beating them.
Well, his sneeze also.
I mean, sure, but
Scott, you've watched the game long enough. You've seen teams dominate a game and somehow they find a way to lose. I'm not saying it's like as an insult to Boston. Like just things happen,
Yeah, but I'll definitely take my if the Bruins bring their A or A- game, which we haven't seen yet. Even game 1, they didn't bring that, and they still won. So if they bring their A or A- game, like, I'm not worried. What worries me is that we're now going on to game 3 of the series, and we haven't seen it yet. So
yeah,
they do have to find it. But if they play the way they're capable of, then they're going to win the series. Like, I'm not worried about that. To me, it's, can they get there? And Bergeron back to get there. Because we, as we've said, like, now that we know it's an injury, it's okay. What is the injury and how severe is it? And, how close is he really? And is he going to be, 85% when he comes back, or is he going to be 60%? Like, the discussions, because in illness, like, you can say, okay, well, you recover from an illness, you get your strength back, and you're good to go. An injury, now we have to deal with, like, is it going to linger and all that stuff. So,
and how long do you need to rehab? And like, is there certain things like certain progressions you have to make? Yeah, and he hasn't been on the ninth floor from what I can tell. Like I saw Greer up there today, but I didn't see Bergeron, and I don't think he's been watching the games from up there. He might be watching them from like in the room, but yeah, I didn't see him up on the ninth floor at any point in the first two games. I'm sure it's killing him. It's probably, a terrible feeling for him. And I'm pretty sure he speaks to the guys in between every period, but totally different when you're sitting there and watching your team with your suit on rather than being able to be with them. So yeah, it's a huge factor. But do they have the depth that they need to overcome it? I think they do. Like you saw it in game one. They were able to still take that game, and Zacha has filled in fine on the first line. I don't see anything wrong with Zacha's play, but the way that the ripple through the lineup would be if you got Bergeron back, it would strengthen the lineup because you get the check line back together, able to move Bertuzzi back a line. It would give you more options, more flexibility to try to counter whatever moves Florida might make matchup wise.
Yeah, Scott, I think you said it best. So we'll have to keep an eye on that point, Bridget, if Bergeron comes back for game 3. I think you said it best, Scott. I agree with you. I think if the Bruins bring their A game, I made the comment anything can happen, right? Which is true. But yes, if they bring their A game, I'm very, very confident that game will lead to wins. The good news is nobody on this panel here thought that they were going to go 16-0 en route to a Stanley Cup, hopefully. So, perhaps it's better to get this slap in the face and this bucket of cold water dumped on them right now, and really truly wake them up, because nothing will get a team playing the way they need to play, like the fear of elimination and realizing that, oh wow, Boston had 65 wins this year and we had 135 points, and Florida had 40 something wins and 92 points. But guess what? 2 games into a series and both teams are 3 games away from going home. So it's a very sobering and humbling loss for the Bruins tonight, and hopefully that can energize them and play some responsible hockey on Friday night. So if either of you have closing thoughts, now's the time. I don't want you guys to be up until 7 a.m. doing this episode, so I'll throw it to you guys real quick.
No, I think I'm good. We'll see. We might find out on Thursday. Montgomery has a press. There's no practice, but Montgomery has a press conference at 11 a.m. Maybe he gives us an answer as to whether Bergeron's traveling or not. So we'll see. But that'll be the first chance we get to potentially get an update on Bergeron, because if he travels, then you would have to assume that means they think there's at least a chance he's gonna be available.
He's gonna travel. He's gonna travel.
One of 3 or 4. Why would he travel if they know he's not going to play, though?
It's part of this game, and also it's part of him being an emotional leader. So he's gonna travel. He's gonna go. He's gonna be there as a leader, even if he's not playing. I think he's gonna travel. So I don't know if we're gonna learn anything from that. I mean, we might learn something from what Montgomery says, but I feel like he'll travel either way.
I mean, it depends. Everyone's only speculating on what it is that he's dealing with, but one of the things that's come up is back. Well, what's not good for a back? Sitting on a flight for 5 hours. So, you know what I mean? If something like that, or people speculate about concussion, you're not supposed to fly with a concussion. So, I'm just saying, if it was something like that, where they know he's not going to play, or they at least know he's not going to play game 3, he could potentially not travel, because getting on a plane would not be the best thing for whatever he's dealing with. So, but that's just speculation. We don't know what it is. So,
okay. Well, here's some further speculation. I think the podcast is about to wrap up. So if either of you have anything else to say, I think now is a good chance to probably sign off. And just to recap, so the Bruins fall to the Panthers 6-3, series tied 1-1. heading back to Sunrise, Florida Friday night. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you very soon.